Big fan of swimming, big fan of art. And by art, I mean like museums, some exhibitions, cinema, theater performances, things like that. And a fun fact here, I actually learned how to swim actually learned how to swim when I was in university, when I was 21. So a quick fun fact here as well. Yeah, and let's have a look on our agenda. So what we're gonna be talking today in terms of like the timing. So we're gonna have roughly first 20 minutes dedicated to the slides. I'm gonna talk a bit more about what do we mean by influence, what's the specifically influence without authority, why it's challenging, and how we can navigate through it. Then we're gonna have 5 minutes dedicated to Q&A. So feel free to type in your questions in the field that you have in the chat box. We're gonna be happy to answer your questions. So feel free to start posting something there if you already have something, or feel free to add it on the go once I'm gonna be presenting my slides. Then we're gonna have 10 to 15 minutes dedicated to practical exercise. We're gonna brainstorm together. It's gonna be a little bit of activity or interaction with each other. Would be happy to hear your thoughts on the question I prepared for us. And and then we're gonna wrap up with a little bit of a free mic feedback sharing. Feel free also to post in the comments. It's gonna be like open conversation, and I'm really looking forward to collaborate with the audience, with you guys. So yeah, that's a brief overview of our agenda for today. So yeah, let's straight start with our topic. So I think it's really a good point to start the conversation about influence by actually thinking about what is influence, like where it's coming from, and what are the situations in our life that we deal with influence. So and I decided here to not to keep it like a super academic, share with you a couple of stories that in my opinion are quite a good representation of what is influence is. So 3 key short examples or stories here. So I think the first one we all can relate to. It's like classical situation in a supermarket, and I've seen one. I saw one at the beginning of this week when I was doing my groceries. So it's like when a child is trying to influence his or her parents to buy a particular item or particular chocolate bar. Could be anything, but it's indeed a great example of of the influence, especially when you're like not at all in a position of authority, like you're a child. So that's a very good representation of what is influence. The second story or second example here is I used here like a picture from Simpsons. It's basically for me about that the influence might come from your siblings, from your brother, from your sister, and for me, throughout the whole TV show, their influence on each other. Bart and Lisa, they're in a constant influence on each other. They shape together. They impact each other, and I think that's also a good picture to keep in mind when we think about influence, because they're like peers and they can impact each other in a completely different ways, and that's very very unique setting in that sense. And the last story, it's more coming not from the personal life, more from a professional angle. It's about the relationship between mentor and mentee, and you might think, well, this influence is quite straightforward because usually people who are mentors, they are considered more senior, and therefore the impact goes only one way. But actually, it's a two-way road. There are a lot of practices in big international companies like Mars, and I know it by my own experience, that it works both ways. And you as a mentee can 100% impact your mentor. And I have this experience myself. I've been with interaction with my mentor at Mars for now actually more than 3 years, He is from Poland, and we've been like able to maintain amazing content so far. And it's not only about me learning and me just listening. It's about how to have a conversation, how to share ideas, thoughts on a certain topic. So it's definitely an interesting dynamic there, and there is a massive influence potential in such kind of relationship. So I think it's also a good story to keep in mind, like where influence might come from when we speak about that in professional environment. It's not only about manager and direct report. It's also about mentors and mentees. And on the bottom of the slide, kind of a quick summary for this first question or slide, that the influence is indeed the ability to impact, to shape actions, decisions of others. Either you can do it directly when you're in a position of authority, or when you have such kind of capability or capacity, and also you can do that indirectly, and that's what we're going to primarily be talking about today. It's indeed how to do that without direct impact, so to say. And moving on, when we speak about influence without authority, or influence when you are not in a position of authority, I think the first question that I see is, okay, but why it's challenging? Like, what is unique about that setting that is so challenging that a lot of people struggle with? Yeah, let's have a look what we have. So two main let's say sides of the slide. Let's start from the left hand side. Others. Why it might be challenging from the others' perspective? Well, I mean, first of all, people don't have to listen to you, and it's not only in a professional aspect, but also in a personal life. People tend to have their own ideas, and sometimes they just don't have time or don't have capacity to listen to your ideas. So it's totally normal. It's totally natural. It's just the way how things are. The second point is, everyone has its own agenda, and this agenda might not be aligned with your agenda, and that's as well totally fine. Happen both in personal and professional life. It's just good to, I would say, to acknowledge that, to be aware of that, and not be disappointed when you realize, oh, why you're not listening to me, or why you have a different agenda behind this topic. So that's the second, I think the second portion, why it's indeed challenging. The third one, I mean, quite frankly, people are driven by personal motives, not only professional ones, and that's especially very eye-opening for people who just join corporate world. Yeah, it's very interesting when you actually realize it. We do have personal motives, and that motives might come from all over the place: your family, your financial wealth, a lot of different motives out there. We all know better ourselves. And the fourth point in the others category, people also tend to take decisions based on rational motives. We all really strive or really want to be rational, but sometimes we don't really realize that we are doing some irrational things. It's just happen, so to say, on an autopilot, and it's really good to be aware about that, and not only about others, but also about yourself. So that's the fourth point in others category, that is really making this whole conversation about influence without authority quite challenging. And the last point here, people might be driven by small group interests. So, and what I mean by that is, there is a term that is called common good, and usually people are more they might be driven by small group interest, maybe by a group of the particular team that they are part of, or if that's a small business, the interest of this business, versus common good. And by common good, it means that it's going beyond your small community, and sometimes there might be a conflict, and sometimes this conflict is healthy. Sometimes it adds a little bit of a pressure to the equation. but it's also really good to be aware about that, because that's a dynamic that you really have to take into account when you think about influence. And I think it's a good moment to pause quickly here and just try to maybe give take maybe 5 to 10 seconds to think about it. Okay, here's what is challenging. Maybe you have particular questions or comments you want to make in the chat. Feel free to do that. I would be happy to a bit elaborate if something is not clear, or maybe if you have a question about overall influence, difference between motivation and influence. I'm happy to have this conversation and share my perspective. So feel free to drop any questions in the chat. Indeed, as my colleagues are mentioning in the chat, feel free to do that both in English and Russian if you don't feel comfortable doing that in either of those. We're going to be soon approaching indeed Q&A session. But let's get back to the slide content. We still have the right part of the slide to cover. So let me draw your attention there and have a look on what are the things that might be challenging in this influence when we're speaking about ourselves, right? When you are in the position of, okay, I want to influence, what are the challenges here? Well, you might lack experience or credibility, and it's not only about experience, having that in a professional environment. Like, I don't have experience of working at big companies like Mars. It's also about, I don't have experience of influencing. I haven't experienced that before, and that's for you quite a journey to go through, because you build it by practicing. It comes with it. So yeah, the first one, indeed, you might lack experience and credibility. The second portion in the right section is you might not know internal agenda. Maybe you just joined the company and you're really struggling to understand what are the priorities here, what are, so to say, the things that are not being discussed actively, but they make a massive impact in terms of organization. So keep that in mind, because sometimes you really want to change things, influence things, but you might not know the internal essence of it or internal agenda that might be there. Another point here is you might not have enough time and or resources. And what I mean by that here is, influencing is not an easy topic. It's not an easy task that really requires you to invest some kind of such a certain amount of time to actually make it happen. Because, like, if you barely know someone, you cannot really relate to someone and make let alone influencing the particular person. You really have to first invest into that, build connection, build relationship, and only then you can start influencing. It's very hard to influence without authority and without really knowing person. And I think that's where manipulation can come into play, and that's where people usually confuse influence and manipulation. Because if you really want to achieve certain results without even sharing that with other people, that's manipulation. And usually manipulation is gives you quick result. You can achieve your results in a quick manner, I would say, because you're not really investing, you're not really trying to understand the another counterpart in order to properly influence and negotiate. So that's the third point here. The last point is, well, it's also a very, very good point. You might not be liked by others. We're not like $100 to be liked by everyone, and that's, again, totally normal. With some people, you tend to have good relationship. With some people, you tend to have kind of neutral relationship. So it really comes down to personality, with whom you have good relationships, with whom you have maybe not that good of a relationship. It's totally normal. It's okay. You just have to acknowledge that and keep that in mind when we talk about influencing. So that's the challenging part. And what's very interesting is, okay, but how do we deal with that challenges? What are the tools? What are the I would say more what I'm more going to be focused today is what are the practical ways how we can navigate through that challenging situation. So let's move on to our next slide, and I'm gonna a bit share with you a little bit more on what exactly you can do and how exactly you can influence others. And before we're gonna deep dive, I see already a couple of questions. Amazing, guys. I see a couple of questions. So from Sonia, feel free to add more. We're gonna have actually a Q&A session literally after this slide, so I'm gonna be happy to dedicate certain portion of it and have a conversation. So feel free to add any questions, comments you have. Maybe you have a comment about the previous slide. Maybe you have a comment about this. Feel free to add questions, comments. Happy to hear from you guys. So let's have a look what exactly we can do, how exactly we can influence. So keeping in mind all the challenges, right, coming from others, coming from yourself. Let's have a look. First, we can do that from a rational perspective, and second, we can do that from the, so to say, emotional perspective, right? And what I mean here by that, from the rational perspective, well, as you might see, it's about logical arguments and it's about domain expertise. So it's something that is almost objective enough that it's very hard to challenge. Like, you cannot really challenge data if you are 100% sure that the data is right, that you did certain checks, you make sure, okay, this is the right data and here's what we see. For example, you cannot really challenge companies' financials if that's what they have, if that's what they report. It's just an example here, but you can use that in a business context, right? You can use data, you can use facts, you can use analysis to convey certain message and to convey certain message and focus on that. Interesting point here. When I started my career, I was very leaning towards rational, and I was completely dismissing emotional. I was doing like a lot of analysis, facts, data, presentations, like everything. And for me, that was like convincing enough. I was like, well, that looks amazing. Let's proceed further. That's like a no-brainer. Let's move on. But for some people, it's not enough because they value something else. They value something else apart from the data. Of course, data is very important, but apart from the data, there is this emotional aspect that we tend to neglect, that we tend to omit, and we're gonna talk about it in a minute. The second point is your expertise, your domain expertise. And what I mean by that is, I mean, imagine like you are talking to someone who has, for example, 10 or 15 years in project management. It's going to be quite tough to influence him or her regarding this specific area, right? Because there is a certain expertise coming from his or her own experience that you cannot. It's very tough to challenge because the person has his own experience, and that might be a massive lever for influence as well. Imagine like someone comes into a room with a really incredible resume, and you're gonna really listen to it because it's kind of I would say a natural law. It's what how humans operate, I would say, mainly. Of course, I mean, it's very good to challenge authority and be able to question it in a open manner. But it's very good also to keep in mind that this domain, this expertise, might be a massive lever for influence. So that's the rational part, and then there is also emotional part. So emotional part is a little bit it's a little bit different. As I mentioned, right? I've had my experience at the beginning of my career. I was like doubling down on rational and completely ignoring a lot emotional. So let me a bit elaborate what I mean by this. So first one, it's your relationship via network. How you can how you can find someone who is really on your page, really shares your perspective, and how you can build relationship, build connection, and really leverage. If you know someone from other department, it will be it will be a bit more easy for you to convince maybe a manager of this department, because you're going to know insights, but more importantly, you understand what these people value, where is their priority, right? And you can align on that, and that will be way more easy to influence if you have a personal relationship. And that's something you cannot really build quickly. You really have to invest. You have to have coffee chats. You have to have, maybe a couple of beers in the pub or bar. You have to have some personal conversations, and just to understand this person on a more deep level, rather than just having this work relationship, which in most cases we spend, let's say on average 8 hours per day in the office, but we barely know each other because we communicate only about work-related topics. You have to also build relationship and leverage your network. The second piece here is personal connect, which are very much connected to the second, to the first point. It's about, okay, how do you use your network and go beyond just having professional conversations? How you leverage this connection, how you build trust, how you build integrity within your relationship. And it's about time. You really have to invest in that. Last two points, in emotional part, they are very interesting, because they might be like, okay, but what do we mean by alliance? What do we mean by group? So it's might be quite new for some of you. So let me a bit elaborate. So when we speak about alliance, it's about finding people that you can trust, finding people that share your perspective, and then using that as okay, let's get together, let's think together, let's brainstorm together, and then you will use that dynamic to influence others. Because if others see, okay, there is certain alliance there, quite some people aligned on one particular topic, right? It's going to be very convincing to join that alliance. And that's how you can change a lot of things within an organization. That's how you can change a lot of things within your personal life, how you build alliances around yourself, how you find these people that are on the same page with you. So that's the third point, that you can really invest into and use as a tool to influence others. And the last one here, but definitely not the least, it's creating group dynamic. How you convince people to join you, how you form groups around you, and that's very interesting, because when you create a group, and that group is, maybe disagreeing in a good way, because disagreeing by itself, it's not a bad thing at all. It's very healthy most of the times in organizations, because that's how you can get and seek for truth. The group dynamic itself, it's already kind of a discomfort for people, because imagine, like, if you have your own team, like, let's say team of 4, team of 9, and 5 people of 5 people out of 9, they are on the same page, and 4 people, they're not on the same page. There is already a dynamic there, so you can impact each other, right? And by just having this, it's already a massive lever for influence. And it comes down to, how do you form that group? Do you know what are the people who are going to join you? How you convince them? So yeah, it's about those things. And just to quickly make a brief summary here, there is no silver bullet. Like, you cannot just pick one and say, okay, it's going to work 100%. Remember, I shared with you my experience that I was doubling down on the data and rational part. The key here is to be really capable to apply both, and really adapt and adjust according to the content, to the circumstances around you. Maybe you're talking to a particular people that tend to be more empathetic. Maybe you're talking to people who they only care about numbers, and you're gonna leverage a lot the rational part. But really keep in mind that you have to make sure you can combine both and apply both when it's needed. That's very important. So that's about exactly how exactly we can influence. Feel free to add additional questions after this slide to the chat. We're gonna have a conversation soon. So yeah, feel free to drop any any questions if you have, if you're wondering about rational part, about emotional part, maybe something was not clear. Happy to a bit elaborate and add a bit more clarity if something was unclear. But now it's indeed the time to have a quick Q&A. So we already have a couple of questions, so I'm going to be happy to dedicate, let's say 5 to 7 minutes to this conversation. Let me just make sure that we're going to be on time. I'm going to time myself. So again, if you have any other questions, feel free to do that. So the first question, I see. Thank you. I see it from Sonia. Why it is important to know how to influence in your life, how to influence others in your life? That's a very good question. I think it's indeed quite a fundamental to understand in the first place. Indeed, why it's important. Well, that's my quick answer is going to be, well, you cannot really accomplish a lot of things by yourself. You have to have other people around you. And that's both in professional and personal life. So let's take professional life. Like once you join and even in university, right? Once you join some kind of organization, you're not there by yourself. You work with other people, and sometimes you might disagree with people, or sometimes you might not understand them to full extent, and you really need to. Okay, now is the moment that I disagree with a person. Should I say it out loud? Should I not? But if I disagree to the extent that I cannot really move without expressing myself, so you really have to influence others, because that's essential for your own well-being and essential for results that you're going to be judged by in a corporate world, or maybe judged a bit of a extreme word. I would say maybe other people will perceive you by the way how you communicate with others. Right. And the same in a personal life. Like you have to have conversations with your friends, with your spouse, and every conversation involve influence, because you might have different opinions, you might have different perspectives on topics, and it's totally fine to disagree, totally fine to negotiate, but influence is I would say, essential part of this disagreement, essential part of the negotiation, because you will have to think about how to convince others if you really believe in something. So I hope that that gives you clarity here, Sonia. But feel free to to ask another question if that was maybe not enough. Would be happy to elaborate more. Let's have a look what else we have. What's going to be our next question? So a question from Tammy: as a teacher, how does one influence students? Teachers have a position of authority, but most students and people do not like being told what to do. That's indeed true. Some people tend to disagree and not listen to other people, even if someone is in a position of authority. And I mean, that's also happened in a professional life at a big corporation. Like people might disagree with their manager despite having this position of authority. So in that sense, well, you do have several levers of influence, right? Of how you can impact the situation. Like first, you can have a one-to-one conversation with a student, understand his or her position, where they're coming from, and why they believe that they should not follow or listen to your advice. And then, of course, like if you are unable to resolve this kind of situation one-to-one, of course you can involve others, some other people in your school, or maybe also talk to parents of the child. So there are different levers how you can do that, and I would say it's also totally fine. Like authority is not something that you have to obey no matter what. And we see that across the globe. It's totally fine. Very much dependent on the personality. And I think if someone is disagreeing with authority, it tells me more about his or her mindset or character, rather than just the fact, hey, he's disagreeing and that's bad. It's just a starting point, and how you manage it is gonna show your capability of influence. So yeah, that would be my comment here. Okay, that's good. We have more questions. So what tools can help me shift from a dominant style to a more influence-based leadership approach? Very good question. Very good question, Angelica. Let me quickly think. Well, I think first of all, we need to understand what do we mean by dominant and influence-based leadership. I would assume by dominant you mean like really being directive, maybe sometimes micromanage people. Don't you potentially maybe don't give them enough freedom to make their own decisions. So I think the main tool you can use here is delegation. How you can delegate some of the things that you thought, I can only do that, I cannot really delegate, or I know better. I will then be really directive and dominant, and I will say what to do. Well, try to start with a small step of delegating something small that you feel comfortable with, and then you can see, okay, what's going to be the output, and then you can always have a look together on this output together with your associate, together with your team member, and think about it and have a look together. And I guarantee you're going to be surprised that a lot of people, they really have a lot of brilliant ideas, but they just don't have, I would say, freedom to express them. And you can leverage this, delegation. Another lever here, another way how you can, or tool how you can use influence-based leadership, or value-based leadership, as some people say. Like, you also might think about, but what are my values? Like, what I really value at work, that I can share with others, and they potentially can relate to it. Because if your value is freedom, you want to give others freedom. For you, it's also important to make your own decisions. That's like a completely different conversation, because if you value that, then automatically your mindset, your behavior, and your action are going to be in a completely different place. So that's also keep in mind. Think about, okay, but what I value the most as a manager, and if you value that, there is a chance that other people also value that. So share that with them and see what's going to be their reaction, and it's going to be way more easier to influence others, and give them more freedom to make their own choices. Yeah. So let's take one more question, and then we're gonna move on. We're still gonna have a bit of a time at the end. So thank you for the presentation. My question is, what should I do if opponent tries to confront me in a tough manner? I'm a gentle person with a non-confrontational character. Amazing question. That's very, very frequent situation, because some people are more into conflict, some people are less. Well, first of all, I think what's really important to do in such kind of case, really call it out. If you think that someone is confronting you on purpose, and that what makes you uncomfortable, call it out, share right now, right in the conversation. Like, you say, hey, I appreciate you sharing this, but the way you're sharing really makes me uncomfortable, because you're using high tone, you're almost screaming, or you're using some personal adjectives. So always try to call out, because you know what? They are not influencing you, they are manipulating you. Because when some people go emotional, or they really want to, how I say here, yeah, indeed, to achieve certain goals without really trying to understand your side, they're trying to manipulate you. They're trying to get this quick result by creating a lot of pressure. And a very good technique is you call it out, you give it back, and then you see what is the reaction. If the reaction is like if the person is dismissing it, well, you can say, okay, let's then take a pause. Let's schedule a slot to have a conversation and the other day, because I see that you maybe now not in the best mood to have a conversation. So it's, especially if you are type of person, as you mentioned, more of a gentle, more of an empathetic person, for you it's going to be very, very tough to have that conversation, especially like in that kind of dynamic. So you take a moment, you say, okay, let's reschedule it, and then you can prepare in advance, because you already know that person. You know that he or she might go quite emotional, quite confrontational. So you can prepare in advance what's going to be your reaction. Maybe you're gonna, think about what's going to be your response. Maybe you would also respond in a so to say confrontational manner, to be on the same page and see what's going to be the dynamic. So yeah, that would be my advice, my quick advice here. Appreciate your question. Feel free to add more questions if you have them. We're gonna have a conversation. We're gonna have a time at the end also dedicated to questions that are left. Now moving on. That's what I thought is going to be really good to do, to have a conversation. Feel free. I mean, you're going to use your chat for that. So what I share with you is, okay, what is influence? Why it's challenging? I hear what we can do from the rational side, from the emotional side. But the key problem with this approach, and I mentioned that, is the time. Usually, to fully implement this approach, you really need time to invest it. To invest into your expertise, to invest into analysis, to invest into relationship building, to invest how to form a group or alliance around you, right? And the question I have for you is, how would you address this issue of influencing others if you have only limited time? For instance, 2 months, right? Like, imagine you have a particular situation in your personal life or professional life. I would say, let's take professional, and you're struggling maybe with convincing your manager to launch a certain project, right? And you just joined the company. You have only 2 months, let's say. Like, what you're gonna use in order to influence him or her if you have limited amount of time? Let's say the decision is going to be made in 1 month. What you're going to use, how you're going to prioritize. So feel free to add your comments in the chat. I'm going to be reading them out loud. Yeah, we're going to have a conversation. The second bullet here is just to help you a bit. What areas, right? Remember, we talked about rational, we talked about emotional. It's a good moment to test your memory. What you would focus on, right? What you would do? What would you pick? Try here maybe to reflect a little bit, and use your own examples, right? Try to use your own examples and analyze yourself, where you were good at, where you were bad at. Yeah, so take a moment. We're gonna give you 2 minutes, I think, just to think about it. No rush. Give it a thought, and then we're gonna get back to have a conversation in 1 or 2 minutes. So yeah, just wanted to give you a bit of a time. I will also track it on my side. Let me see. Yeah, quickly I will set up it for 2 minutes. Yeah, so feel free to use chat box to share your answers. How would you address this issue if you have only limited amount of time, and what areas, rational or emotional, you would focus on? Yeah, and in 1.5 minutes, I'm gonna get back to you to see what are the comments. Okay, we have 45 seconds left. Share your comments, your ideas in the chat. Sorry about that. I was talking to myself. Yeah, so I just said it's good. We have first question, first comment from Tammy, and I was making a point that it's very important, guys, to interact, to use this exercise as an opportunity to relate to the content and really try to map and connect tools to your own situations, that you can say, okay, if I'm in this position and I'm really constrained by the time, what I'm going to use, and it's really important how you arrive to this conclusion, so we can discuss. So the first comment was from Tammy. I would show data or maybe some anonymous service that show my point and how to change something. That's an interesting one. That's interesting. So showing data is indeed quite effective. We discussed that. Showing survey, that's also interesting because you are relating to opinion of others. That might be powerful. Yeah, no, that's a good one. That's a good one. Thank you for sharing. We also have another comment. Schedule one-on-one meetings to identify personality types to get a better understanding of the approach that I can use. Split people into groups. Appeal to emotions with a group of emotions-based people. Appeal to facts with logic-based people. Form an alliance with the people that lean towards your ideas, push the ideas further. That's actually a very, very good comment. Totally agree. It's a very handy technique. Now you know it. Okay, when you deal with someone, try to understand like what really matters to this person. More on a rational side, or more on an emotional side. More empathetic, or more data driven. Because once you understand how people make decisions, it's very easy to influence people because you know what's important to them. And you say, okay, if you want to get some project approved and your manager is really driven by savings for the business, you're going to be, hey, I have this project. We're going to save $100,000 on an annual basis. He's going to sign it way easier than if you go, hey, we're going to improve relationship. We're going to break silos. Communication is going to be, where are the savings here? I don't see savings. So really, really pay attention to that. Try to understand people and then act accordingly. So very good comment. Another comment from Nadezhda. She's saying she's going to use rational data. In fact, usually speak for themselves and consider to be more convincing. That's a true statement. I would say in general, data is more convincing because you're relating to the fact, and it's very tough to challenge data, especially if you're 100% sure that your data is correct and there are no quality issues with it. I totally agree with that. And in most cases, that's going to work. That's why at the beginning of my career, I was really leaning towards rational, because it's like, how you can really disagree with the data. What I've come to realize is there are some people, like, I approach them and say, hey, here's data. Data is suggesting us to change the process, and let's go and change it. And some people say, well, you know what? I've been in this company for 20 years. We've been doing in a completely different way, and it's working. And I don't see the reason why we should change it. And then you're like, but there is a data. But on the other hand, person has been working for 15 years, and you're really struggling, right? You cannot easily convince that. You cannot easily convey the message when person has quite a strong personal experience, and it's proven on a practical level. So that's where emotional part comes into play. We also have comment from Larissa. So before I read out comment from Larissa, I think we're gonna dedicate maybe 2 or 3 minutes more to this conversation, to this discussion, and then we're gonna have, let's say, 5 to 10 minutes at the end for your questions. So if there are questions that are burning questions, feel free to drop as well. So Larissa is saying, okay, I'm gonna set clear goals, prioritize tasks, create an action plan, and seek help or collaboration, regularly monitor progress. Yeah, it's like more, you're going to approach it more from a rational perspective, with priorities, with having a clear plan in place. and also a little bit of collaboration here. So I would say you're trying to use both, which is very interesting. You're trying to, at the same time have goals, priorities, but also you're not neglecting the collaboration piece with others. It's very important. Good ideas, guys. I mean, I actually enjoyed it. It's I can totally relate to the points you mentioned. So let me see. Yeah, so that was the last comment from Larissa. Let me show you the next slide, because I think the next slide is going to represent what you were trying to convey. What I've come to realize that the key learning here is you build on your strengths. If you are limited by time, and if you are an empath, make sure to leverage the emotional part. But if you're more analytical, then leverage the rational part, because that's what you're good at. That's what would be easy for you to do, and therefore it's going to be less effort and better output, better influence, because you're good at. Maybe you can good and that's usually it comes from your personality, from some of the natural tendencies, and that's actually the question, the answer to my question at the beginning, why I was so focused on rational, because I'm by nature like that. I'm good at that. I'm good at working with numbers. I'm good at leveraging the analysis part. And then for me, that was a learning journey at Mars, how to learn the emotional part. And now I can play with both in a good way. So yeah, keep that in mind. Build on your strengths. That's very important. Yeah, so that was actually it. The main part of my presentation and our quick collaboration. So let me. I think I can stop sharing here, and we can have a quick conversation about any other questions that you might have. We still have, I would say 8 to 9 minutes. So yeah, feel free to drop any questions. Maybe I think we have something from the past that we. Yeah, thank you for sharing those. So that's the ability to influence people is kind of a leadership skill. It is at Mars. At Mars, we have that as a separate competency. It's called literally like that, influence without authority, and that's exactly part of your leadership skill. Because, like, if you ask yourself what kind of leader you are, if you can make things done only when you are in a position of authority, how are you going to drive projects? Usually projects are cross-functional work. You have people from other departments and you don't have authority over them. So it's indeed part of leadership skill set, and it's a separate capability. Yeah, it's a separate capability. Okay, so we also have a question: will the slides be shared? I think we can share it. We can share it. If there's going to be sort of like an email follow-up, we can attach the PDF version of it for sure. That's no problem. Another question from Tammy: can we implement these skills in teaching children at school? Well, if you think about dynamic in school, I think you as a teacher can clearly see that some folks in your class, they're getting together in a group, they're building alliance, they're trying to influence each other, they're trying to impact each other, and I think that's a very good point, that you can actually acknowledge that fact and share it with children. Hey, actually, what you are doing is part of influence, and let me tell you a bit more about it. So I think that's a very good that's a very good point. Yeah. I think that was the last question. Let me quickly check. Slides, yeah. And also I see the comment from Tammy. Good point about building on your strengths. Yeah, happy to to share. Group dynamic. Could you please explain it again? Sure. So maybe let me quickly check one word to make sure I communicated properly. Just came to my mind. Yeah. So group dynamic is when you convince others or to be on your side, because they share your perspective, they share your vision. And group dynamic means you're creating asynchrony in your team. And asynchrony means, in Russian, that's asynchronous. So asynchrony means there is a certain discomfort in place, and people tend to, when there is discomfort, our natural reaction is, we don't want discomfort, we want comfort, right? We want to address this point, and people are more willing to negotiate. People are more willing to influence each other, and in order to arrive to a concrete conclusion, right? So we can all be on the same page, and we don't have the discomfort coming from asynchrony, because asynchrony is like, if you have it within the team, it's very tough to lead the team, because you basically have two different teams that are going in two different directions, right? You really want to solve that, and that's a good lever for you to keep in mind when you want to influence others. So yeah, hope that that gives you a bit of a clarity about creating a group dynamic. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. It's a comment. It was a comment from Tammy. Thank you, guys. Well, it was really a pleasure. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you learned something new. I would be very much pleased if you're gonna implement those practices, those tactics, approaches in practice. That's very important. Give it a try. See what's gonna be the outcome. And what I bet you're gonna notice is you're gonna learn by doing. Once you do it, like, I can talk for hours about this, but it's more important how you do it, because practice is everything in that sense. Try to reach people, try to understand, okay, is this person empathetic? Is this person more rational? How I should approach it? So yeah, give it a try, and you're gonna learn a lot from the practical aspect of it. So yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you for joining, and we're gonna really look forward to seeing you and communicating with you on our next webinars. It was a pleasure, guys. Thank you so much.